that have a really interesting relationship with a crab, which is really primitive and is used by humans. I think this I don't know. Did your article talk about this? The horseshoe crabs that are used for medicine, and then the red knot, which is a little migratory bird. So, this is one of the most primitive species on Earth. Their blood is blue, by the way. And if you've ever had a shot, you have their blood in your veins. A very small amount of it. The medical industry uses the crab. Their blood indicates spoilage, so you don't get the shot if the shot is spoiled. And of course, their breeding season produces a ton of eggs, and those eggs are like a critical pit stop for this migratory bird. Of course, because we need them so much for medicine, there's not enough left for the birds, and so it's one of these like classic conundra of like what we need, what nature needs is sometimes in conflict with that. But it's just sort of a neat story because it's got like cool coverage of the crab life, cool coverage of the bird life, a cool ecosystem challenge issue about their relatedness, and it's short. So I like it. Plus, I have to admit, one of my many obsessions is migratory animals, because I'm a migratory animal. Do you all know those swallows that nest at the Mission and under the bridge at Refugio and stuff? Like the mud swallows that build like a little annual nest underneath roof lines and stuff? Those birds are from my hometown in Argentina, so like where they migrate to and from is actually the migration that I made from my native land to this one. And then annually I go get the glory in the Sierras because it's like my endless summer thing. You know, I'm here for the good times and then I go up there for the good times. So I like migratory stuff. So anyway, I just really like this movie. It's like 45 minutes. You can check the trailer tonight. It's short. Same movie plays again tomorrow, so if you can't see it tonight, you might be able to see it tomorrow. Questions about that? If you are subscribed to messages on Facebook, you may have seen that there's a Quizlet for Unit 2. How many of you know what those are? Do you require a specialized application to see those, or is it HTML-based, browser-based? So I actually have never used these, but students tell me about it. I should probably just check it out. But it's like a flashcard format of all the vocab for Unit 2. It's made by one of my students in Period 1. So if there's any errors, you can blame her, Nina McHugh. If your grade tanks, it's her fault. But I'm giving her like a couple points extra credit for building these, and she says she can probably do it every unit. So hopefully right before you have an exam in my class, there will be a Quizlet on the Facebook group that lets you study if you like to use flashcards, which is, some people argue those aren't actually good for you to study, just saying, but if you want, you can try it. I don't care. So today we have like 3 very fast things to do. And something unique, Unit 2 had 1 day more this year than it had last year. So what took me 2 days last year, I've been able to stretch into 3 days this year. But we're going to have a little spare time at the end today, so I think we'll have a little sit and chat session. Maybe we can all find out what's making Mackenzie fall so excited on her cell phone. I'm sure my class doesn't make that kind of smiling. So, okay. Any questions about carbon cycling 14 and 15? You just got this assignment stamped today, so by now you've seen all the parts of it. Anything you want to ask me before we leave carbon behind forever? Or nitrogen before we leave nitrogen behind forever? Yes?
I just have a question for the, what's the big cycle again,
I realize now that I've kind of established a pattern for how I explain this that I'm going to try to draw from the beginning every time next year. I've made notes for 2015 to use this. So think of it this way. This is the biotic, which is kind of the little cycle of carbon, right? Like plant. It's a little baby sneeze. Plant, animal, perhaps other animals, atmosphere, plant, animal, other animals, atmosphere, plant, animals, atmosphere, right? The biotic one. And then this is like a little distraction inside of this, which is like the major global atmosphere to rock, long time scale, right? So this is like small, fast, short term. And this is like global geologic cycle, whole atmosphere stuff. Agreed? Bear with you. Hold on. Let me finish your answer. And then in the nitrogen cycle, same thing. There's like the little biotic stuff, which is like dirt, plant, animals, poo, dirt, plant, animals, decomposition, right? That's like the little one. And again, just like that, the big one is like the global nitrogen stuff, which in nitrogen is not like a rock cycle issue. It's all the atmospheric plus all those bacterial transformations that happen in the soil. So you've got the little stuff, the short-term, fast, this happens before your eyes, you know about this, we see it all the time. And then the large scale, like the global transformations that occur at like gross volumes. We're going to do that again when we talk about phosphorus today. So there's the little one, which is like the day-to-day biotic decomposition, composting stuff. And then the big cycle, which is like, in that case, lithosphere and atmosphere. Agreed? Lithosphere and atmosphere. This one, which is atmosphere and soil ecology and atmosphere and soil ecology. Yes? And then the one that we're going to do that you haven't seen yet is basically lithospheric and hydrospheric and lithospheric and hydrospheric. And then your comment and then Fel.
What is in the carbon cycle? What is the big area, like the leakage?
That's decomposition, so that's the little cycle.
Oh.
Like out of the little cycle, little bits drip out. Yes?
And that's that one. Isn't it?
Yep.
Okay.
From taking nitrogen through all the steps, like what word you said the AP wants to know all those words and terms for them. Like what is ammonification and like do and like right under the rapid, like what
Got
do
you.
you have to know?
When things decompose, there's a lot of separate chemistry that happens, right? Like when I decompose, some of my carbon will go to the atmosphere, right? That's like aerobic carbon decomposition, one thing. When I decompose, like the liquids will weep out or evaporate out. And so I'll have like, you know, like sweating of water or like evaporation of water from my dead carcass. And the nitrogen compounds, when they decompose, it's a process called ammonification, where you take proteins, amino acids, and when they decompose, you make ammonium. It's called ammonification because you're making ammonium. It's a special type of decomposition.
Okay, so the words that we have to know throughout will kind of be ammonification and then nitrification and denitrification.
If it's underlined, you got to know it. So fixation, assimilation, digestion. Some of those are just like plain English words. Like assimilation, that's not actually a sciencey word. That just means to like take something in your family, for example, you assimilate your adopted sibling. So assimilation just means to make it your own. Digestion just means to break it up and reorganize it. And those are just like English, but you have to know those. Fixation, yes. Ammonification, yes. Nitrification, yes. Denitrification. Yes.
And AA is just amino acid.
Also Alcoholics Anonymous, but yes. Okay. Sorry, I'm making notes to myself. All right. So, no other carbon nitrogen stuff? Oh, yes.
Why is the nitrogen cycle primarily different?
Because you'll notice there's no lithospheric step, there's no rock cycle involved. There isn't a very significant amount of nitrogen in rock. And all of the reactions, they're not really spontaneous chemistry. They're not like water chemistry. They're just reactions in bacteria. That's what I mean by driven by life. Like all the changes in nitrogen, those happen in living stuff. You feel me, Doug? Yes?
What happened to the root nodules again?
Root nodules are structures in plants. Not all plants have them, just some plants. That house those bacteria, the nitrogen fixers, so that the plant has like a chef living in the house. Like you've got the source of what you need living in your tissues.
Nitrogen was proteins? Or?
Exactly. So because some plants need a lot of protein, they put nitrogen fixing bacteria in their roots. They literally give them a home. It's a symbiosis.
If you like pull one of those plants up out of the ground and look at the roots, can you see?
They're visible with the naked eye. Yeah, the root nodules are about the size of a little bead, like the ones that children will string with really fine strings sometimes. They're like that size, slightly smaller. Head of a pin. Yes? The nodules, not the bacteria.
Yeah.
Yes.
For number 18 about the phosphorus cycle,
Phos-
what?
That's what I'm going to talk about. That's all my plan. What else? Sorry, I was entering my attendance, but I'm listening to everybody. What else? Sam, can you please go to AJ Henning and pick up my map? You know who AJ Henning is?
No.
He's down in the Mat Academy. Somewhere down there, if you ask around for AJ Henning.
What did you want again? Map.
Map. It's one of these watershed maps. Okay, childrens. Now, today, number 18, the phosphorus cycle. I've been reduced to like squeezing it into this last little corner of my whiteboard. So this is it, the phosphorus, right here. Hello. Thank you. Oh, baby. And first, let me show you the parts of our drawing because I know that it's small and hard to see, and even standing right next to it, it's confusing. So let's just get all the parts straight, and then we'll talk about why they're there, okay? Mountain. River, tree, rabbit, birds, algae, little fish, medium fish, big fish, living in the water, sediment, that black streak is phosphorus. I should make it green like all the other ones. Right up here, on top of my mountain, that's an excavator. He's mining. Phosphorus. Okay. So mountain with phosphorus, excavator, river, tree, bird, rabbit, fishes, ocean, land, ocean, land. Would anyone like to ask me something before I start? So, the one thing you've got to know about number 18, the specialist thing about phosphorus, is there's no gas phase here. You've got some lithosphere. You've got some biosphere. Here with you. And you've got some hydrospheric, but no atmo involved. Yes?
Is that
This is the river spilling into the sea. We got our bio, our litho, and our hydro. Now, I think I was telling Fel, but maybe I was telling somebody else. I realize now there's a way I want to explain this with my little and my big. The little cycle and the big cycle. The way that I want to explain this now is the little biospheric is like everything else we've talked about in a food web, just like nitrogen, just like carbon. Please look up. Plants fix phosphorus out of the water. Then it's cycled to rabbits, cycled to hawks. The hawks poop, and the poop decomposes, and that goes back to the tree. Little cycle, right? So living things, other living things, however many living things. Decomposition makes it available to plants again, right? Please tell me this is sounding kind of repetitive. Like, yeah, the little cycle, I get it. Yes? And one special quirk of phosphorus is that we get it back out of the ocean if it's still in the biosphere. So this is kind of a special quirk, but it's just regular old biospheric digestion. Watch me. If that rabbit falls into the ocean as he decomposes in the water, or phosphorus carried by the river, that would go into the algae, little fish, big fish, and then if the birds eat the fish, they might be able to poop it onto land. Seabirds bring a little bit of phosphorus back onto the coastline. I think you read about that, right? That was part of your homework, I hope, for number 18. So far with the little cycle, I'm really hoping that I haven't added anything new here. If you did your homework, that should all have been there. Now the big cycle, kind of like we were doing here when we talked about carbon, there are some interesting, gnarly details. Will you please stretch this out at the end of your counter there? Once it's flat, we'll hang it up. Maybe lay it upside down or something. I want to go back to carbon for a minute because I'm going to try to build a pattern. Watch what happens with carbon. You've got, first of all, biotic cycling, decomposition, the little cycle. I should have said this all along. And then some amount of carbon exits the biosphere. Remember we talked about the leakage, carbon sinking? And some amount of that carbon gets into the rock, and now you got to wait like a gajillion years for lithification, uplift, erosion, weathering, or volcanoes to put it back in the atmosphere. Yes, the slow big cycle. The one thing that humans are doing wacky is we're burning out all the rocks and putting them into the atmosphere faster, so this is the imbalance in this cycle. Okay? Yes? So now phosphorus. Key issue. Because it has no atmospheric step, because there's nothing in the atmosphere here, no phosphorus in the atmosphere. All phosphorus is carried by water, so it's on its way downhill. You can have it in the biosphere, but any leakage is going downhill. It's carried by water, and water don't go up. Everybody knows that, right? Water goes downhill, gravity. So the key concept is, please watch, phosphorus becomes available to the biosphere when rocks dissolve. Here, that's your warm-up answer. Phosphorus becomes available to the biosphere when rocks dissolve. Erosion and weathering. So I hope this doesn't cause anybody to trip, but technically phosphorus becomes biospheric when it becomes hydrospheric. Is it in the water? Does that make sense to everybody? You know what I mean? Like when water picks up phosphorus, it's available to life because the plants will suck it up. Right? Once the rocks have dissolved, it's in water. Phosphorus can be used up by a tree. The rabbit will eat the tree. The red-tailed hawk will eat the rabbit. We can go biospheric all day, right? A bird poops, another flower grows, the flower gets eaten by the cricket, gets eaten by the mouse takes a poop. That poop washes into the ocean. We're still biospheric because that phosphorus goes into algae, it goes into little fish, it might even come back onto land with the seabirds we talked about. That poop washes back into the ocean. And imagine there's leakage. Little fish eats the algae, and the big fish eats the little fish, and the really big fish dies and is buried in a mudslide, so you can sink it out of the biosphere back to rock. Just like carbon makes organic impurities in rocks, so does phosphorus. And now comes the wacky part. Just like we said with carbon, once it gets into rock, you got to wait like a gajillion years for that tectonic plate to move, pop up onto exposed land somewhere, and then for water to start weathering that rock. That's a gajillion years. Everybody got the little cycle and the big cycle?
How is that
Phosphorus is never in the atmosphere. The only thing that can literally move it, like literally against gravity, is some living thing. So I put the bird in there because birds poop and there's a lot of phosphorus in poop.
But do they like eat the trees or like how do they get it right?
We could talk about a plant-eating bird, or we could talk about an animal-eating bird. Either way, it's just to keep it in the biosphere. I was only putting the animal in there. It's another type of biospheric cycle. Yes?
So, like in the question it said, how does it get back onto the land? And that would be either like from the birds or like tectonic plates.
That's right. So it's either part of like geologic cycling, or technically it's possible for some ocean phosphorus to come out and burn it. Anybody else? Because humans do one weird thing with phosphorus, and I couldn't really fit it on my drawing very well. Yeah.
when the then it goes back into the cycle?
It's still biotic. We're still talking biotic.
And then it's like the end of the cycle starting back up again.
I suppose so, yeah. You put it back in the plants. Yeah, the poop decomposes. Yeah.
There's a pea in the rabbit, right?
There's a pea in the rabbit, yeah. Phosphorus is in all those living things. I want everybody to please notice the pattern because I want to refer to carbon and then I'm just going to get the one difference. Just like carbon, phosphorus moves around various parts of the biosphere. One living thing, another living thing, digestion, decomposition. Everybody got that part? In the little cycle, there's one difference. Carbon enters the atmosphere, phosphorus does not, but I think we're okay. Just like carbon in the big cycle, there's a little leakage that will eventually turn into rocks, and those rocks are moving around the planet, and through erosion, they re-enter the system. Just like carbon. Right? Leakage, sinks, geologic cycling, weather. Now here's the special thing about phosphorus. You can't grow plants without it. Does anybody know the three main fertilizers? Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. NPK. That comes up a lot in my class. NPK. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. NP is one of those. And the story about phosphorus is farmers can't grow food without phosphorus, so we have been mining rocks very aggressively for hundreds of years, digging up all the phosphorus deposits we can find in rocks to make fertilizers to grow our plants. We have successfully done a lot of hard rock mining to get phosphorus as a fertilizer. And problem, much of that has washed into the ocean. Much of that is depositing on the bottom of the sea. So here in carbon, we accelerated things by taking the lithic and adding it to the atmosphere. There in phosphorus, we've accelerated things by using up all the rocks that have phosphorus for us. No climate problem, except we are running out of phosphorus. Pretty soon, we're not going to have the fertilizers to grow our food. How many of you have heard of the concept of peak oil? The idea that at some point, oil productivity peaks and then it starts to go downhill as you run out of oil, peak oil. Apparently, we're also pretty close to peak phosphorus. Globally, we fear that we're starting to run out of places where we can dig up phosphorus as a fertilizer for plants. Because it only goes downhill, most of the phosphorus we ever had available to us has already washed away to the ocean. Anybody want to talk more phosphorus? By the way, that's why I put that excavator at the top of the mountain. The excavator is mining the phosphorus. That's all being added to the flush down to the ocean. Fun fact, people are talking about using our coastal areas as the last filter to recapture phosphorus. So if you want to get a Nobel Prize, here it comes. Design a reactor that takes phosphorus out of wastewater before you put it out in the ocean. Find a way to crystallize phosphate out of wastewater. A, you'll be a billionaire because the price of phosphate keeps going up because we're running out of mines. B, you'll save the planet. This is like one of those things where your generation, somebody's waiting to pluck that fruit. That's going to be billions of dollars or something. You got it. Okay, anybody want to talk yet?
For 15, when it says how to use carbon in photosynthesis and respiration, where else does carbon come from? And where else does it go?
So carbon also comes from weathering and I'm trying to make sure that I understand the question right. Okay, so carbon comes from weathering of rocks. It's carbonate ions in water, so it does live in the hydrosphere a little bit. Off-gassing to the atmosphere. It comes from decomposition, too. A lot of carbon comes from decomposition. when you burn stuff, anything that breaks carbon bonds, like when you burn stuff. And most of it either goes up into the atmosphere, a little bit dissolves into water, and an even smaller amount gets trapped in sinks. This is the last call for questions on 2.3, or forever hold your peace. Yes? They are organisms that use chemical reactions as the energy source to build their energy storage compounds. Like, you know how plants use solar energy to build glucose? So in the bottom of the ocean, there's these bacteria that get unstable, hot compounds from the deep sea vents. And when those compounds break inside of the bacteria, they use that energy release as their energy source. It's just another way to make your energy storage compounds. Yeah?
What is the nitrogen carbon thing?
So I can tell you what the question is, like what that means, but I don't want to give you the answer until you've done the reading assignment. So are you asking about what answers the mystery or what is the mystery? So, like, economists have been doing this scientists have been doing this global budget of carbon. How much is in the atmosphere? How much is in plants? How much is in animals? How much is in algae? How much dissolves in water? How much is in rock? How much is fossil fuels? And basically, there's like a little missing part. Like when I was in junior high, my mom and dad were having some money problems, and they did a budget. And I remember one day they were like sitting at the table, and they're like, every month we've got like $120 we can't figure out where it's going. And they were like, where is that part of our budget? It doesn't add up. We're leaking $120 and it's a mystery. Missing money. In that case, it was me. I was stealing money from my mom's purse. In the carbon case, there is this clump of carbon that ecologists can't figure out how it's leaving our system. There should be more carbon in the atmosphere or in the biosphere or in the ocean, but it's missing. It's going away in some mechanism that we didn't know until a couple years ago. So when they wrote your book, they didn't know where it was. Now they do. And it's number 20 in your reader. Yes?
I'm just kind of confused. Is there like a big cycle for the phosphorus? Like,
There is. It's just the ones that's dissolved in water or the stuff that's in the rock waiting for uplift to come back out of the ground. So you notice that this one goes into the ground and back to the atmosphere, and that's really slow because you're talking about a geologic cycle, right? This one is also really slow. It's carried by water downhill, and then it goes through rock, carried by water downhill, and it goes through rock. So that rock cycle is, again, really, really slow.
okay, so where does it go after rock? It goes up to
Yeah, uplift, weathering, and where the river runs through those rocks, and you get it back into the hydrosphere. You feel me, Doug? The problem for humans is we've used up all the available rock, most of the available rock. And at some point, we're not going to have any more that we can mine to fertilize our farms. Yeah?
Because from the ocean, it goes into upwellings?
So the upwelling thing was kind of confusing. That's just part of the biotic cycle part. Like some of the phosphorus sinks and then comes back up to the surface, and that's where the fishies get it. I still consider that all biotic. So your book talked about upwelling. That's just an extra detail of the biotic cycle. The big cycle is when it becomes rock. Now you got to wait like forever for it to come back out. Upwelling is just like a distant part of the biocycle.
So then that figurative thing is it goes from rock and then it goes into rivers and goes into the ocean, but then what happens in the ocean? If not that.
So upwelling is still part of the biotic. The part where it leaves, where it becomes inaccessible is when it sinks, when it becomes rock. So now that it's become rock, now you got to wait bazillions of years before it'll erode again. Make sense? No? You said, you know. You want to ask me something? Because I'm here. I got time. This is all we have today.
Well, how does it go from rock
Okay, that's
out
fine.
of the ocean, like after a billion years.
I can answer that. It's a good question.
That's the only way it gets out of the ocean. Well, I mean, I know it comes from the birds, like eating the
Okay.
fish and the plankton.
So there's the biotic stuff, which is short term, like you can see this with your own eyes. Stuff eating stuff, eating stuff, eating stuff, pooping, eating stuff, birds eating fish, eating. We're still in the biotic. Once it gets to the bottom of the ocean will someday be land. That's a fact. It just takes a really long time for the tectonic plates to move that far. They do move, right? Like the Santa Barbara Hills were the bottom of the ocean. Gibraltar used to be sideways, and that was sand. Okay? So that's what I mean about a really long time. When it gets made into rock, you've got to wait a tremendous geologic time scale for that tectonic plate to move, smack into another one, pop out of the ocean, and start getting weathered away by rainfall. Yes? So that's what I mean. Like when it gets to the bottom of the ocean, if it's still cycling and if it's still in life, that's biospheric. If it's locked up in rock, now we're talking geologic time scale for it to become available again. Yes? Yeah.
How does it get into that rock? How does it?
Oh, I think phosphate crystallizes something. I'm not really clear.
It just like sinks.
It's some method of lithification for sure. Like I don't know what the details are, but it does lithify. There are phosphorus deposits in rock. What else? If we're done, I'm moving on. Feel free to put away your paperwork. I want to talk about extra credit. Can you put this back? Sure. Careful, Cedar. This is going to hit you in the head. Yo, bro. Because Unit 1 exam discussion is tomorrow. All right. So now, childrens, I want to talk about extra credit. Tomorrow you're going to see your tests, and some of you are going to be a little sad. When I asked you how you did, everybody was like, "Oh yeah, pretty good," like this. And I was like,
Oh God.
so I'm not picking on anybody. Some of you will be surprised, like, "Oh wow, I did better than I thought." I'm just saying, like, it happens every time in all your classes when you see your test. Sometimes it happens to me. You're like, "I did a really good job." People are like, "You really didn't." And I want everybody to understand that testing in my class is like a long-term learning process. Are we still taping right now? Are we taping?
Yeah.
Taping is good. Thank you. Taping is good. Testing in my class is like a long-term process. You'll get better at it over time. Failure is fine as long as you're learning from it. That's how we get better at things. I don't care. And in order to keep you from being discouraged, I want to remind you that there are many methods of extra credit. Some of you have taken advantage of the weekend stuff. That's cool. Some of you have been taking advantage of the movies. That's really cool. A few people have done like independent, like step up to do additional work, like Nina making the quiz things, and these folks running the shows, and some students have sent me like interesting emails. Like one of my students is gonna, instead of you all having to do emails for your parents' email information, remember that assignment at the beginning of the year? He's going to make a link on my website where you go to a form and you enter all that. Like, anyway, kids get extra credit a lot of different ways. But the one that some of you have started and most of you have failed at is the extra credit submissions of content. Now, I really like this extra credit. Like, as an idea, I really want you to keep doing it. And for you, I think it's a cool opportunity because, like, a lot of my students learn a lot by looking through the content. Like, as a teacher, I feel perfectly fine throwing out a few extra credit points if you're researching our topics. This is good learning for you. Thing is, a lot of you are giving me stuff that I can't use. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. I'll show you the ones that didn't get credit first. I want you to notice that on the back, it says, did you make sure this is relevant? Did you make sure this is within the last 12 months? Did you make sure that this is grade level appropriate, like we're talking to smart 17-year-olds? Did you optimize the format to fill 1 or 2 pages? So first, no credit because these do not fill 1 or 2 pages. Coincidentally, I also don't know what the hell that is. This one doesn't really fit 1 or 2 pages because I just wanted graphics and info material. This one is just kind of fuzzy and hard to read. Like some of this, when you look at it on the actual paper, it looks even fuzzier. The reader's kind of smart and it's blended the pages, but on paper it doesn't look that good. Also, this one I was trying to figure out how it's relevant. Check out this one. Somebody printed out like a whole article. This was like 8 pages. It may have like interesting graphics, like that little carbon image in the middle, but I can't use this. Like I can't just cut this and throw it into my reader. I need you to be the one that goes out of their way to resize and reformat so it fills 1 page, so I can just throw it into my reader. Again, a whole article that, yeah, there might be some interesting stuff in this article, but that's just too much writing. Okay, so those are the ones that 0 points due to format. Too small, too fuzzy, too much writing. Next. There are some which might have one of my vocab terms, but they don't really add anything to the class. Like this visual of what the world's population would look like if they were concentrated at the concentration of certain cities. That's neat. But if you have an argument like this really helps me understand something, write it down, because otherwise, I don't know. This one, like, yeah, it talks about precautionary decision making, but I don't really think that really helps with my class. Like, what does this really do? Like, how's that going to serve my students? Here's one. A utilitarian justification. I don't really think we needed a graphic for that. Likewise, a graphic for open systems. The graphic for the water cycle. I mean, that's like a really good graphic and everything, but like, there's already a graphic for the, I mean, like, I don't think that that doesn't help a lot. You know, I'm already the biggest paper waster on campus. When you give me one of these, you're like, waste another 180 sheets of paper, please. And I'm like, kind of feel bad about wasting the paper, so I want to be really picky about like, no, this has to be really helpful. Check this out. A joke about, like a cartoon about population size. Like, that's cool, it's funny. But it's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for stuff that like really builds the class.
Like an example.
Like this one, a thing of, like a comic about Tragedy of the Commons, like that doesn't build my class. The last thing I want to do is show you the ones that I give credit to. There were a few that are just not helpful in this unit, but I'm going to say when I give them back, like, you know, this thing about waste management and stuff, that's a pretty cool infographic. Turn it in when we talk about that one. Or here, about energy, that's pretty cool. Let's talk about it when we get to energy. This one I can't really decide if I want it. This one I have to admit I'm still on the fence about. This one I'm on the fence about. Something about like environmental quality, like those numbers are neat, but I don't really see what they add to the class. This might be cool in a different unit when we talk about risk and human issues. Now we're getting somewhere. Here comes the ones that are relevant. I'm still trying to figure out if they're worth adding to my class, but at least these kids got points. Because this is like straight up like relevant. A cool graphic about what happened with Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. This is just a really nifty infographic, and I got 2 copies of it. I'm not really sure that I'm going to add it to my class, because it's not really about overfishing. But at least, you know, like, 2 kids gave me the same thing. Like, at least this has something to do with the fishing stuff. You know, I could give this out after Happy Fishing, maybe write it on the back of the paper. Just be like, hey, and by the way, you've got this thing when you're bored, check it out. I might use that. These things about population growth, I got a couple of different ones about population growth. Maybe I should throw a visual into the slideshow, all right. Fisheries exploitation. I think this one I might actually use when we talk about carrying capacity and quality of life. I got 2 different versions of that one. And I got this comic about the tragedy of the commons, which actually does explain it in a different way. I'm not really sure that it adds to the class, but I might, you know, throw that in. I don't know. Now, get ready. Here's the sort of stuff that I'm really looking for. These are sweet. These add to the class. They clear up confusion. They have interesting data. This is adding to my class. Remember when we did the paper or plastic warm-up? What if I handed out this thing that has data about the comparison between paper and plastic? Remember we talked about water pollution? And I was like, oh, it's like a zillion times worse. Well, this actually has the numbers about how much worse in water pollution terms. Like, that's adding to the class. This is what I mean, nitty-gritty. A little graphic that I can use, and again, another graphic I can use for the dependent or independent variable. That adds to the class. Remember we were talking about megacities? This is a map of the megacities and also shows how much they are growing. Like these, some of these I really like. Those last 4, I want to add next year, I think. Yeah.
Where's DACA? The one that's growing, DACA, whatever it is, it's growing 53%.
Oh, I do not know.
Sounds like pretty good.
I want to. Oh, it's DACA. And I think that's in